all die upon this train.
We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. The second part of today's presentation comes from Renee Scaletta, Communications and Outreach Manager for the Black Swamp Conservancy. Renee joined the Black Swamp Conservancy in the summer of 2024. She grew up in Southern Ohio and received her Bachelor of Science in Environmental Policy from Bowling Green State University. We just heard about Bowling Green. An avid traveler and outdoor explorer, Renee has been leading outdoor recreational programs and adventures for 6 years. She is passionate about the environment, wildlife, education, and people, and we are excited to have her with us today. Let's give a warm Life It to You welcome to Renee.
Thank you so much for having me today. Can everyone hear me okay? Good? Thumbs up? Louder? Gooder? Okay. If you have a hard time hearing me, just like raise your hand or something. I can talk pretty soft-spoken, so I will try my best. All right, I got some people already waving at me, so I know that I need to project my voice today. All right, again, thank you so much for having me today. I really love any chance that I can get to walk away from my desk and actually get out and talk to people. As that lovely introduction just said, my name is Renee. I am from the Black Swamp Conservancy. I am the new Communications and Outreach Manager. I just joined the Conservancy back in midway through June this year, so I have not been at the Conservancy for very long. But this is still a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I have been in the natural sciences field for over 6 years now. We're actually approaching 7, which is a little wild for me to think about. Before we get into the presentation, I just kind of want to lay down some expectations regarding my presentation. Now, I don't really love talking at people. I am a naturalist by trade, which is a fancy way of saying that I am a nerd about the outdoors, and I love getting people in the outdoors. So that being said, I typically like talking with people rather than at people. But unfortunately, due to the constraints of this presentation, I will be talking at you a lot. But there will be moments during the presentation where I will throw a question your way, or I will give you something to engage with. And I hope you take that opportunity to engage with me, because like I said, talking with you all would be a whole lot better than just talking at you all. So how about we get into it? Yeah, maybe. Huh? If this will cooperate with me. Am I? This one? Right. Aha. All right. So Mike did a wonderful job going over the history of the Great Black Swamp, so I really won't get into it. I will say it's a little intimidating for him to talk about how awful the Great Black Swamp was, and for me to be like, but we're trying to bring it back. So I hope you bear with me and give me a little bit of time to explain ourselves, because while there were some formidable aspects of the Great Black Swamp, it was a truly magnificent swath of natural land. I think this left photo here is a great example of capturing just how large those trees Mike were talking about were. Yeah, 3 young women, probably about my age, standing at a trunk of an oak tree. When we think of oak trees, we don't think of anything nearly as big in this Northwest Ohio. I know when I think about trees that are this large, I'm usually thinking about the California redwoods, not Northwest Ohio, but we did have trees this large, and in some areas we still do, but not as much as there used to be. And the photo to the next was also a part of the reason why we don't have those large trees anymore, or the reason why we are not knee-deep in mud where we stand. That is a Buckeye Steam Traction Ditcher. It is one of the devices that were designed to help ditch out Northwest Ohio and made it very easy to do so, actually. So like I said, Mike made it very clear that the Black Swamp was a hard place to live in. And it was, and that's not something that I can ever deny. However, stories and history paint the Great Black Swamp as a ghost of a bygone age. But there are still remnants of it that remain today. We here at the Black Swamp Conservancy like to say that we protect 2 of the 3 remaining swaths of the Black Swamp. One of them is not Gall Woods. That is protected by the state of Ohio, but that is one of the remnants of the Great Black Swamp. The other one is, or I say one of the 3 that we like to say, is right here. This is Bell Woods. Bell Woods is a 72-acre plot of wood that sits right behind our offices. So our offices, if you're unfamiliar, which how many people before today even knew that the Black Swamp Conservancy existed? Oh, more of you than I expected. That's awesome. Our offices are located in Pemberville, Ohio, so about a 45-minute drive from here. And this plot of wood sits right behind our offices, which is an old farmhouse. It's lovely. I like to say that I work at home. I don't. I work in a farmhouse, but it's a lovely place to be. Even more lovely is the swamp that sits behind it. Now, this is not a pristine woodlot. You can still see sunlight coming through the canopy. As Mike described, the swamp was so thick and dense with those large trees, you wouldn't see those branches until about 50, 70 feet up. So sunlight had a really hard time penetrating into the Black Swamp. You can definitely see sunlight coming through here. But even if you look at the back edges of this photo, you do see some of those old growth trees. In this 72-acre plot, we do have some of those large old growth trees that Mike's were talking about. They're not pictured here, but one of them is actually the home to a heron rookery. Great blue herons are the symbol of the Black Swamp Conservancy. As you can see with our logo in the corner, we love our great blue herons, and part of the reason why our logo is the great blue heron is because of that heron rookery that sits right behind our offices. So every spring, we have herons that migrate back to Ohio, and they come through our offices. They sound like pterodactyls above the sky. You kind of don't know what's going on, but it is beautiful to see them fly into the woods, and it's something that we are lucky to experience every day in the spring. This second one that we protect is our second remnant of the Great Black Swamp. This photo is a little bit hard to make out just because of all the reflections off those lovely vernal pools, which is indicative of a healthy wetland. But this is Forest Woods. Forest Woods is a big project right now of the Black Swamp Conservancy. It is something that we started about, don't quote me on this, I believe about 5 years, and we still have quite a bit of restoration to do. This plot is 394 acres. And is the largest remaining woodlands still standing in northwest Ohio outside of the Oak Openings region. Both of these plots are one of the highest quality forested wetlands in the state of Ohio. So state of Ohio grades wetlands from a scale of 1 to 3, with 1 being the lowest quality, but not poor, still a good quality wetland, but 3 being the highest. Both of these at a scale of 1 to 100, scaled in 87, which puts it at a Category 3 wetland. So these are the highest quality wetlands that you can have in the state of Ohio. And some of them are in our backyards.
So could you describe what constitutes and what happens to make something a high level, a high quality level?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So things that we are looking at are historic flora and fauna. So both of these plot lands have historic flora and fauna of the Great Black Swamp. So there are trees, there are plants that have been here since people started coming into the swamp. So we have historic and endangered species throughout the swampland. Another one that the state looks for is habitat in general. Does it provide good habitat for our bird species, for our wildlife species, for endangered state-listed species? The other one is water retention. Does it have vernal pools in the summer? Does it adequately hold that rainwater, that runoff water? And I'll get into why that's important, but that is one of the things that they look for. The other thing that they look for is overall general health of the soil and the plants within. So those are some of the few categories. There's a whole lot more in the scientific mumbo jumbo. That's not really my purview. I wish I had my conservation associate with me. She would be able to talk a whole lot more into that. But big things we're looking at are the health of the overall wetland, the health of the water within, and its ability to retain and treat that water. That being said, these two plots, even though they are two of the highest quality wetlands that you can find in the state of Ohio, their total acreage only surmounts to just under 500 acres of wetland. When compared to the Black Swamp covered 1 million acres. So there is very little of this remaining. And that is not just a fact that it is affecting Ohio. So it might be hard to read some of these news articles. These are ones that I Google searched a couple days before this event. So this is not old news. These are dated 2024, 2023. Wetlands are disappearing across the world. In the US alone, half of our wetlands are gone. In Ohio, we have lost 90% of our historic wetlands. And if we look on a global scale, 35% of those wetlands across the world are disappearing. We have lost 35% of our mass of wetlands, which is about the size of Alaska, Texas, California, Montana, New Mexico, and Arizona combined, if you think about on the scale of that. Most of that loss occurred between the 1970s and the 2015. But that loss is even now accelerating. So it's been accelerating since the 2000s. As I said, it's not a local phenomena. Things like population increases, urbanization, climate change, and changing consumption patterns have all fueled changes to land and water use across the world, which has led to our wetlands to degrade. So why does that matter? Before we really get into the why, I want to ask you guys a question. We're going to talk about kidneys. I'm sure this is a topic that some of you are familiar with. My best friend does not have her kidneys at all. What happens to the human body when we lose our kidneys? I'm hearing some mumbles. Does anyone want to talk? Raise their hand.
Gets toxic.
Gets toxic, yep. Anything else?
Y'all are smart people. Don't be scared to answer. You know what you're talking about.
I do have a reason to ask this question. I know it seems weird to talk about kidneys, to talk about wetlands, but there is a point. I get toxins. Okay. The old adage is that wetlands are nature's kidneys. So if we want to think about it, what happens to nature when we lose our kidneys? Anyone throw out an answer? There are no wrong answers. You eventually die. So our natural areas, that's a little bit of an extreme, but we are heading that way. When a human body loses its kidneys, our bodies are no longer able to filter out toxins. When toxins build in the body, it causes catastrophic effects on our health. When nature's largest bodies of water, like fresh water, like the Great Lakes, no longer have their wetlands, they can no longer successfully filter out waste from the water that is flowing into them. Much like the human body, this can have catastrophic effects on the health of those ecosystems. And one of them is something that we are very familiar with here in the Toledo area.
Yeah.
I know from the groans, we all are familiar with this is. Can anyone just shout it out? What are these? Algae blooms, yes. But would you believe me if I told you that algae blooms are normal? They occur in even healthy ecosystems. But do the ones behind me look normal? No, they're not. They're not. Algae blooms become harmful when they grow out of control, like the ones pictured here in Lake Erie. So the ones on the right are recent blooms throughout the years. Lake Erie has suffered algal blooms frequently since the 1990s, but this has been a problem dating back to when we started draining the swamp. So, fun fact for you all, in 1960, Lake Erie was once declared dead. That means that due to the nutrient load and the phosphorus load within the lake could no longer support life. We had massive die-off in our fish populations, we had massive die-off in our wetland plant species, and we saw far fewer migratory birds come through because there was no food for them. Algae blooms like this become harmful when they grow out of control. They grow out of control for a number of reasons, but one of them are naturally human-led activities, such as farming and agriculture. They have led to more frequent and intense and larger blooms, as we see here. The one on the top left is a bloom from 2017 in the Maumee River. This was a localized bloom within the Maumee River that we believe algae from Lake Erie fed into the river. It's not completely understood why it happened, but it did affect the Maumee River and put hazardous health advisories out into the Maumee where you couldn't boat, you couldn't fish, you couldn't go enjoy the Maumee as we frequently do. The one on the bottom left in this corner is an image I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. It's about an infamous image at this point in time. That is taken of when the algae, or mycocystin, or blue-green algae, specifically what affects our lakes, entered Toledo's water supply. Now, that wasn't an abnormally large bloom. We've had larger blooms since then. This past year was a larger bloom than that bloom. But what had happened was it just bloomed in the right spot to get into our water treatment plant. So, we're going to take a moment. We're going to think about this. I want you to digest it. And we're going to think about Lake Erie's economy as a whole. So, on top of the straightforward natural benefit of having a great lake like fresh water, we need water to live, we need water to drink, especially fresh water. If we take a step back and look at the economy of the lake for the state of Ohio, Lake Erie accounts for 30% of Ohio's total tourism industry. That racks up to be a lot of dollars every year for Toledo. In fact, in 2023, the Lake Erie's total economic benefit, if we think about tourism, if we think about fishing, if we think about recreation as a whole, ended up to be $20 billion. That's with a B, that's not with an M, 20 billion. And of that, over 280,000 jobs rely on Lake Erie. So I want you to think about the blooms that we just saw. And we think about the economy of Lake Erie. And we want to think about why that might be a problem. So larger than normal, harmful algal blooms are a problem, and they're becoming bigger. They're becoming more frequent. And in that, not only do they have an economic impact, they have a health impact. Algal blooms, when exposed to them, so if you go swimming in the water or if you go drinking in them, can have acute and chronic health issues. Right now, there's a study coming out about what happens when we breathe in algae from just being near the lake and river. So that's something I'm sure will come out, and it will make us go, but there is a effect of us being in the water. It does affect our health, it affects our pets' health, and it affects wildlife health. Because wildlife don't really know that that can kill them and that can harm them. So they go in and they hunt for fish and they become toxin, and then we find that damage in the wildlife down the way. And also, wildlife can be harmed through hypoxic area, which basically means all that algae that's blooming, that large algae, chokes out all the oxygen that's in the area because sunlight can't penetrate through. So these larger blooms not only threaten human and wildlife health, they also are costly. So as I said back before, we talked about the economy of Lake Erie, the increasing blooms. This had led to a decrease in property values, lost tourism and recreation, and increased water treatment costs. In fact, a 2019 study found during the algal blooms communities along Lake Erie alone lost $142 million annually from these blooms. So they are a big effect on our community. Now, what causes algal blooms? Does anybody know? Anybody have an idea? I have my running shoes on.
Farm nutrients and runoff from farms, fertilizers going into the lake.
Yeah, yep, bingo. Does anyone have anything to add? Sewage. Mm-hmm. Anything else to add? Industry. Anything else? Golf courses. Yep. These are all actual reasons why we do have our algal blooms. But fundamentally, as many have said, a lot of that is because of nutrient load. And that's not just from farms, it's not just from one point source. These are non-point source areas like fields, grasslands, golf courses, farmland. There's a whole lot of things that go into why these algal blooms form. And we're still trying to figure out what we can do about them. But the fact of the matter is, we don't have our wetlands anymore. Wetlands for our first defense against these algal blooms. Because what has happened is now that we have all of these farm fields, these golf courses, these concrete pads, we don't have anywhere for that water to go. Someone had asked a really pointed question, where did the water go when they drained the swamp? Well, the answer is Lake Erie. That's where it went. But our area still wants to be a swamp. So when we get the rainwater, when we get the flood waters, because our area wants to be a swamp, it wants to retain that water, where does it go? Right now, it goes through a pipe. So like the tiles that were put in for agriculture, it goes across concrete. It floods into a ditch, which does not have very much capability of stopping that water from going straight into the Maumee River and then into Lake Erie. If wetlands were present, they would act as a sort of a holding area for that contaminated water. Because what happens is that rainwater, that flood water, floods across these fields. It picks up whatever was put on those fields, which are not necessarily a bad thing. I want to make that clear. Treating our fields are not a bad thing. It's not a poison, as we think about it. It's something that we have to do to be able to provide crop and food for ourselves and for the world around us. What matters is that there's nowhere for that contaminated water to go besides Lake Erie. Wetlands would have acted as a containment pool where eventually those excess nutrients, so that phosphorus, that nitrogen, would have settled to the bottom of those wetlands and been taken into the plant and then naturally dispersed in biological properties where it wouldn't have become such a large problem. But all in all, why does all of that matter? The health of our lake does not just depend on wetlands. Northwest Ohio is a beautiful place. My bio to you all said that I traveled a lot, and always, always, always I come back to Northwest Ohio. Because the health of our area is critical for everything that we do and everything that we experience. It is a beautiful space. We're not just wetlands, we're not just swampland. We have beautiful prairies that you'll hear me talk about later. Up in the right corner, that oak savanna, and the wetland that you have right next to it is part of the Oak Openings region. The Oak Openings region is on the same global scale, this is a fun fact for you all, as the Florida Everglades. It is a globally rare ecosystem, and we have it in our right in our backyards. Down in the bottom, all those white dots, those are all egrets. That is taken at one of our protected properties through a conservation easement. In the summer, the egrets would come in every night to rest and roost where they would sleep for the night. So that was a photo taken by one of our landowners and shared with us. There are hundreds of egrets that come to that property every year. Northwest Ohio is beautiful. That is something that sits with me every day. I know I travel and I talk to a lot of people, and people always go, "What's Toledo like?" And the first thing I want to say is flat. It is very flat. There's a lot of cornfields, there's a lot of soybean fields. But then I hook, line, and sinker, and then I talk about all of our beautiful natural areas. So, the question is, what do? We have to have food to feed our families. And we certainly can't just put the swamp back in our backyards because we have to have places we need to live. So what do? That's where we come in. So the mission of the Black Swamp Conservancy is to protect and preserve natural habitats and family farms in Northwest Ohio for the benefit of current and future generations. Current and future generations. You guys are all in our minds when we do our work. The future generations, so the children, the grandchildren that you might have at home, are also on our minds when we do our work. But that's well and good and all. We have this lovely mission. But who are we exactly? I know some of you knew of us beforehand, but for those of us who didn't, I'll go on a quick run of who we are. We are a nonprofit land trust. Is anyone familiar with the term land trust? Yeah? A land trust is basically, for those of us who are not, any nonprofit that does the work to conserve land. So I'm stumbling over my words right here. A land trust or a land conservancy is a community-based nonprofit, that's important, community-based nonprofit organization that actively works to permanently conserve land. Land trusts are conservation organizations that do work in the people's backyards. So we're not doing work in the Florida Everglades. We're not doing work in California. We are doing work right here in Northwest Ohio, and that is where we will stay doing our work. And that's the mission of a whole as land trust as a whole. As you can see, there are 32 land trusts in Ohio alone. We are one of 7 accredited land trusts, which is a fancy way of saying we make sure we do the highest possible, highest quality work with all of the right paperwork. We don't want to try to hide anything from you guys. We are upfront, we are honest, and we are diligent about the work that we do for the future generations and conserving our land. That's what accreditation means. It's a very high standard of land trust that all land trusts try to reach towards. It's the highest accreditation you can get. We are part of a network of over 1,200 land trusts across the U.S. So this is a relatively new movement. It's only been around, we were established back in 1993. So it's only been a movement for about 50 years, which in the grand scope of things is not a very long time. So it is very baby in the age of growth. But in that, land trusts protect over 61 million acres across the nation. Here at the Black Swamp Conservancy, we protect nearly 23,000 of those acres across 12 counties. So like I said, our offices are located in Pemberville, but our properties range from anywhere from the Indiana border up until Lake Erie. Any questions about that? You can have more time at the end too to ask questions. So we have our mission. You know who we are. How do we get there? We're not just indiscriminately buying up land. Matter of fact, we don't buy most of the land that we have. A lot of that is donated to us by people like you. So the 4 ways that we do it, that we strive to reach our mission, is through 1, protecting water. So we do a lot of our work in the upper water streams of the Maumee River. We don't do a ton of work right on the Maumee River, because right now what's critical for us is getting up into those upper tributaries where that point of runoff, that pollution, that contamination starts. So right now we're doing work in the St. Joe confluence over by the Indiana border. That is the start of the Maumee River watershed, which is the largest watershed to Lake Erie and to the Great Lakes as a whole. It is a significant reason as to why we are getting the algal blooms that we are. Now, I just said a term, I said watershed. Does anyone know what that is? No? Okay, this is why I asked. So I say terms that you may not know. A watershed you can think of as a bathtub. So all the water that falls from the sky as rain or flood waters from other rivers that end up on the land, or even water that you water your lawn, has to go somewhere. So that water all collects in a bathtub, which is the Maumee River. A watershed encompasses all the land, all the rivers, all the tributaries that eventually drain into the Maumee River and then drain into Lake Erie. That's what a watershed is, loosely speaking. So we do our work mostly in the upper edges of the watershed so we can stop that pollution before it even gets into the Maumee River. The second way we do that is through land conservation. So we are a land conservation organization that is part of our name, the Black Swamp Conservancy. And there are two ways that we do that. The large one is through land conservation agreements, which some of you may know as conservation easements. Easement sounds like a big scary word, like we're coming in and we're saying, this is our property now, you can't do anything about it. That's not what it is. It is a voluntary land conservation agreement where landowners come to us and say, hey, I think I have this really high quality property, whether it be farmland. We do protect farmland. That is a big component of what we do. Or wetland or natural land. And they're like, I want to protect it forever. I don't want this to become a shopping mall down the line. I want this to be a natural area or a family farm so we can continue to feed our generations down the line. The other way that we do it is through stewardship properties, which some of you might know as preserves. Public preserves, private preserves, we do have stewardship properties across Northwest Ohio. Right now, I'm forgetting the amount of acreage specifically that we protect, but it's about a third of all of our acreage that we protect are natural preserves. The other 2/3 are agricultural properties and natural properties that are privately owned. Again, those are all properties that were approached to us by the landowner, and they still retain that ownership right. We just help them protect it and help them develop it into a natural area if they should wish it to be. So on that, we restore habitats. So on our stewardship properties, as well as some of our conservation properties, our easement properties, we have gone massive restoration projects, which you will actually see a video of one coming up. And the reason why we do that is because of all the beautiful natural areas that I showed you before. So there's prairies, there's oak savannas, the wetlands, and that is to protect our endangered species, increase biodiversity, and support healthy landscapes, which ultimately help support resilient communities and healthy communities as our world is changing. And then probably one of the number one important ways that we reach our mission is we connect with people like you. So you have me, who goes out and talks to people or writes articles. There are some news stories that were at the table. I know some of you got them. I wrote those. Those are our monthly newsletters about the work that we do. There's also a one-pager that's specifically about the work that we do in this county. And then we have an education outreach coordinator, Laura, who is wonderful, and she goes out to schools. We actually have a huge new project called Learning Landscapes, where we have built learning ed sheds, and we have backpacks filled with scientific gear, nature journaling, muck boots, raincoats, anything that students might need to be able to go out into our prairies that we have restored specifically for those schools. So Otsego is one of them, as well as Eastwood Elementary Schools, are schools that have that learning landscape property so they can come out into their properties and connect with their natural areas. Oh, can you pause it real quick? Hopefully this plays for us. The next thing I'm about to show you is actually that restoration project that I was just talking to you about. This is one of our more recent projects. It focused on the 100-acre restoration of the 160-acre Clary Booley McDonald Nature Preserve. That was a local one kind of to this area. This project was funded by 2 grants from H2 Ohio and One Tree Planted, and was completely done in partnership with Seneca County Parks, Enviroscience, Engineering, and River Reach Construction. And it was a property in which we purchased, restored, and then have recently donated it back to Seneca Parks to become a public preserve. It is a preserve that is not currently open, but it is slated to be open in 2025 as we finish up our as Seneca finishes up their current planning and we finish up our restoration. So this video that you're about to watch is of that restoration process. Maybe. Oh no. Would it be helpful if I went back and then went forward? Yep. Okay, let's try that. Okay. Well, sorry about all this. While we are waiting for this video to load, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Mike.
I was just curious. I've recently been reading about the effects of all the fertilizer we put on our lawns and all the water we use for our lawns. And that was not something that you included in, or that I heard you include in the effects of this. And I just wondered if you've looked at that and if there are any things planned for this area to encourage people to not use all those products on their lawn and to consider how much they're watering their lawn.
That's an excellent question. It really depends on county by county about if there are any initiatives, city by city even. But lawns, personal lawns, do have an effect on what enters our waterway. It's not as significant as we see in some of those more non-point solutions, like the big lawn field, like farm fields, grasslands that may have been treated in the past. But they do have a significant effect on phosphorus load in our water. So there have been some more local municipalities, and that is something that is more local based, not necessarily something for Northwest Ohio as a general. It is something that we talk about. So we do have gardening workshops here at the Black Swamp Conservancy at our homestead, where we talk about natural gardening practices and ways to eliminate weeds that aren't through those chemical applications. So we have our own personal initiatives. But in terms of countywide or citywide, that is something that is more in the works. So it's not something that a lot of municipalities have, because a lot of municipalities still have HOAs, which require you to spray for those weeds and that pesticide. So unfortunately, it's something that I wish there was more effort on, but there's not at this time. Okay, are we good? Perfect.
Some of the first things that I do when we're looking at buying a new piece of property is go out and walk the site and just note all the nature that's out there and just kind of get an idea of what could we do at this spot to bring some nature back. The first thing that I did was walk across a giant farm field. At the other side of the farm field, what I was walking towards was this 50-acre woods. So I knew that I could immediately imagine the woods marching onto the farm field and turning the farm back into a woods. But then once I got to the woods that were actually already there, they were way cooler than what I had been imagining. It wasn't just like a little woodlot with, maybe some old farm tractors that have been hidden away in it. This one has wetlands already in there. So the Wolf Creek flows right through those woods and it floods up into them, and it left behind all these wetlands. And so walking into the woods for the first time, it was just immediately, my feet were wet. There were all sorts of creatures and lots of wetland plants, which was really exciting to see. I love what I do because we really get to make changes on the landscape here in Northwest Ohio. With this job, that I'm able to actually find little pieces of nature and make them bigger and find important places where we need to convert from some of those high-intensity uses and put habitat back on the land. So it's just really fun.
Today, we're very excited to get started on this project. We're excited to get going too. The central goal of this concept that we put forth is to really maximize retention time on the site.
We're really looking to build a diversity of habitats. And we're also trying to mimic what would have been on the land before it was cleared originally. So on this site, we're expanding the riparian floodplain zone, building that forest out, putting in functioning floodplains. In the upland areas, we're going to be putting in pocket vernal wetlands, some prairie areas, and some upland woods.
With this project, just by virtue of its location and how big it is, we're going to be able to bring in all sorts of new wildlife into the site. The wildlife that's already living in the existing 50 acres of woods will just explode. They're going to pop into our new wetlands and new woods that we're making and just have a much more robust population.
This particular project, I think, has the potential to be not only but the best that we've done to date.
Restoration in spring, Northwest Ohio.
Black Swamp Conservancy was founded by a small group of really impassioned people in 1993. This group was really concerned by the rapid development we were seeing. So they came together, and with the help of the Land Trust Alliance and the Nature Conservancy, they founded Black Swamp Conservancy as the local land trust for this community. We really started into restoration work right about 2013. And then when the H2 Ohio program came online, the resources to do this work really expanded. And we're currently doing about 3, 4, 5 projects a year. Probably have about 15 restoration projects under our belt at this point. This project in particular, we've really paid a lot of attention to the floodplain zones and creating different benches at different elevations that will be able to accept water, to hold water.
What we're doing is breaking those tiles in strategic spots so that the water is still coming in from our neighboring farms, but then on our property, the water stops.
A lot of what the machinery is doing is creating shallow depressions that will hold water at different times and at different elevations.
So now the water is flowing across the surface and going into our kidney bowl. It's coming from the broken pipes that we broke in the right spot. The water's able to sit there in that kidney-shaped wetland and interact with all the plants. So now those plants are going to suck up a lot of the nutrients. They're going to slow the water down and then flow out the other side cleaner, almost no sediment, way less nutrients, and then flow into the creek that way. That's really the name of the game, is slowing the water down and letting it filter through some plants.
Feel free to gather around here. I'll go through just a couple quick things. Just a quick review of the overall plan. But what I'd like to do is sort of discuss the major habitat features on this side of the project.
All of the work that we accomplish is done in partnership. We're also partnered with a whole lot of academic institutions who are studying the water quality effects and making sure that we're doing this as well as we can.
We want to get as much water in there as possible, hold it in the floodplain channels as long as possible, and then send it back to the creek.
We want that grade to be messy. That's why we put all the guys that are just learning how to grade. It's all messy and stuff. Their operators are very good, so sometimes you have to tell them, rough it out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you do on the other side.
Yeah.
Personally.
Rob's pumped. Let's do it.
One of the really important things with these restoration projects, we take very serious from day one, is involving the local community that surrounds the projects. We're restoring this site, but we don't want to negatively impact our neighbors. And, the surrounding fields are going to remain farmland. So we are very, very sensitive to talking with the landowners and the neighbors and making sure that our restoration takes on their water, enhances their property, and doesn't at all affect them in a negative way. So once this restoration is complete, we're gonna gift the property over to the Seneca County Park District. That's something that Black Swamp Conservancy often does, is we'll partner with a public agency or a local park district that can manage for public access. And they're gonna be using it to get the public out to learn about nature for outdoor education.
Once the restoration, the initial exciting, earth-moving part of the restoration and planting the native plants is done, there's a lot of management that still has to go on, and trying to get out there and just keep tabs on the flora and fauna and how they're changing over time, because that can tell us if we've done a good job and made a successful piece of habitat, or if we, need to do more work to get there.
It won't take more than 6 months before we start to see little frogs and turtles move into this habitat, and we start to see, raptors hunting over the fields. It takes a few years for the wetlands to really develop and for the soils to start to hold the water. These little saplings that we're planting today are going to slowly grow into trees, and they're going to become a mature forest that are going to surround these areas. This project and the restoration work that we do in general is really about making a substance change for our community and for the future of our community.
The site right now is, looks like bare dirt with some straw on it because it's just getting finished up with the restoration. And so in a year, it's going to look green. There's going to be some water in our wetlands, but probably not a lot of water the first year. And then 3 years later, there's going to be a lot more water staying in our wetlands. There's going to be a lot more wetland plants that have grown up. One of the first things that is going to come to the site with these new wetlands that we're putting outside of the existing woods is going to be frogs. Like, usually when I do a restoration, the frogs are there 2 months after we finish digging the wetlands. What I'm hoping down the line is that we're going to get some of the slower wildlife like turtles. Sometimes it can feel like it's a little speck in the vast sea of corn and soy, but it's so important. And there's so many species using it and people needing it to experience that nature. So it's important for me to be able just to protect these little pieces of nature and improve them and make them bigger and make them more accessible and meaningful.
What we're hoping to do here is, each project builds on one another. We're looking at a future landscape that incorporates a lot more natural area, provides more recreational opportunity, healthier wildlife populations, and leads to a thriving region. My hope is that in 100 years, this is going to be a small component of the bigger picture of what Northwest Ohio could be, because that change is needed.
And that is what we do at the Black Swamp Conservancy, or at least part of what we do. I know there were some seeds going around. I'm just going to wrap things up really quick because I know we're out of time. But the seeds that were going around, if you had a chance to smell them, were from the prairie that was right side outside of our property. So our property is not only home to 72 acres of Great Black Swamp woodland, it is also home to a beautiful 30-acre prairie, which students come out and visit. Those are seeds that I collected this morning, and it's part of the reason of why I do what I do and come out and talk to you all. I bring out parts of the nature of Black Swamp and bring it to you so you get to experience it and get excited about it. If you want to learn more about our work, visit our website at blackswamp.org. I had a QR code. Whoa. Maybe. Whoop, went too fast. Way at the end. Or you can scan if you're savvy enough, but otherwise it is blackswamp.org. Or you can email me at renee@blackswamp.org. And I am so happy to talk to you about this stuff. I love the work that we do. I feel very passionate about the work that we do because every day it affects you, it affects your grandchildren, your children, your family members, so that they can have the future that we currently have. We are able to go out and explore our rivers, explore our woods, our metro parks, and enjoy those spaces. And we want to make sure that they're going to be able to continue to do so, even as the world changes in 20, 30, 100 years down the line. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Oh, thank you so much, Renee. What a great, unexpectedly I mean, I knew it was going to be interesting, but what you do is so important and so impactful. How many of you have been hiking or been out at St. Francis, out by FELC? A lot of you, yeah. So all of that woods and wetlands and farmland has all been set aside in a conservation easement through the Black Swamp Conservancy. And I hope that you will continue to go out there and enjoy it. It's really wonderful, the work that you're doing.
I am really proud of the work that we do.
And it's so cool to see somebody who is so passionate about what they do and so knowledgeable. It's wonderful. What a great dual program today. Thank you so much to Mike Gilbert
Thank you for having
and to
me.
Renee Scaletta. There is information out there by the table. I have just a couple of quick things to say. You may pick up information for the new Tech for Seniors classes. These are monthly classes, not weekly classes. The next one will be held the third Wednesday of November from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. There's also the book club. It is on Friday. The next one will be October 25th. That'll be next Friday. So you come here if you want to, and then have lunch. And then you, at 2 o'clock, you head on over to the Pfeiffer Library and have a wonderful discussion with the librarian and TU students about a book that all of you have read. It's called our Intergenerational Book Club. And I'm going to do another shameless plug. How many of you have heard of the Off Our Rockers chorus? A lot of you. Great. Great. Well, we just started that thing in the end of February. Our first large performance will be held at the Ritz on Wednesday, November 6th. So it's the day after the election. We figured it would be a good time. There, half everybody will be sad or angry, and the other half will be really relieved. And this will be a chance for all of us to come together and not worry about that for a while. So you can get tickets at the Ritz box office. Information is online at the ritztheater.org. But I would encourage you to get your tickets at the box office because there is a really steep fee if you get them online. None of that money goes to the Ritz. None of the money goes to the artists. So along with the Off Our Rockers chorus, there will be some people, some students who are working with Community on Stage, but also the Nathan Santos Quartet with Olivia Van Gore, who's a singer from Cleveland. They are going to do all of those wonderful old songs from the American Songbook. The ones that I used to do in Chicago when I was in my 20s. All of those old songs that Frank Sinatra, and they're just a great, great band. So if you're interested, get in touch with me. That's all I'm going to say about this because we have to get going. So enjoy your lunch. Next week is going to be another great topic, and we hope that you'll see us then. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.